Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk. Hello.
Hello.
I thought I was going to be having to sit on my ball today, but instead I'm in the squeaky chair still. Because if Jeffrey didn't have that chair that you're sitting on downstairs, sitting on my yoga ball.
I wanted to say instead of sitting on the ball, you'd be sitting on a square.
A cube.
A cube. That would be so uncomfortable.
A cube?
Yeah.
They have those all over the place, though. Like,
I guess if they
those
were
little public things where it's easier just to make this little cube bench, like the little individual seats.
I guess if it was a little bit padded or given.
I mean, it's not going to be turned on its sides, just sitting on the tip.
Sitting on the point.
The point.
No.
Now that would be uncomfortable. Nobody should do that.
No. Hey, I watched a movie that I know you've already seen, or I'm pretty sure you've already seen. You've seen The Invitation, right?
Yeah.
It came up on one of the streaming services, and I went, hey, I never watched that, and I always wanted to. Or when it came out, I wanted to. So I liked the little twist.
It's not the one. It's the one where the girl gets invited to a dinner party.
Because
she's supposedly distantly related.
She is, and it turns out she is distantly related to the one family. And they're like, he's like, cousin, come to England. There's a big family wedding. We'd all love to meet. Everybody wants to meet you. Great Uncle Horace wants to meet you.
And he did. He did want to meet her. He was
did.
very excited because they were all males or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was good. I actually just watched that probably 2 weeks ago.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was like, that was a pretty good horror movie.
It was. It was something that, a lot of the horror movies hit the movie theaters, and I haven't seen a preview for them. I don't know what the heck they are. Because Pearl. I watched Pearl.
What was Pearl?
So there was a movie that came out a couple of years ago called X.
Yeah, don't remember that either.
It's by A24, and they're kind of the new Blumhouses. And they've come in and they put out a bunch of... They're known for horror, basically. And it's apparently a trilogy.
Oh. So
X was about this crew going and filming a porn film, and they rent out...
Oh, I heard about it.
Yeah. I actually liked it. But they rent out this kind of like a guest cabin on this couple's farm.
Yeah.
And they're allowed to use the barn for stuff. And their house, this whole pond, and it goes terribly downhill for them. And then, so there's the older woman who owns the farm. Mm-hmm. Well, they made the prequel, and that's Pearl. She's Pearl.
Okay.
Which I find the actress interesting, and so does the director, clearly, because she's going to be in all three of the movies. But she has these temper tantrums in it, and she's just yelling forever. I can't stand that. I can't handle that. It sends me into sensory overload. And I wanted to punch her in the face. Because it's she just gets in people's faces, and she just yells, and then, she murders them and stuff.
It's do you remember Sam Kinison?
Yes.
I had a hard time with him. I thought he was funny. I thought he was very smart. But the shrieking, I couldn't take the shrieking.
Yeah, there's some big journalist or something, some older blonde woman, and she literally yells the whole time she's doing. I think I talked about it on here because I tried to watch a video that she did about one of the stories I was doing.
Is it Nancy Grace?
Yes. She yells the whole fucking time.
Yeah, she does. I don't watch her, but I've seen clips. Yeah.
She came up, so I've been watching, I finished it. I binge watched Secrets of Playboy, which was a A&E documentary. And absolutely horrifying. We went to bed just distraught every night because, again, I posted on Facebook and I was like, we all knew this was exploitation, even though he claimed to be a feminist. He claimed to be a feminist, Hefner.
Yes, and it was...
and he was actually an incel. They said the whole reason he did all this is because he got turned down by a girl for a dance in high school who went out with his best friend. And everybody's talking about how awful she was. And I was like, they weren't even dating. She didn't have to say yes to him. No. All of you. So anyway, very upsetting.
Well, and I think culturally, we reflect back as a culture not personally, but we reflect back on Playboy.
Yeah.
And the magazine and the Playboy Mansion and the Playboy Club. And it was like, oh yeah, the women wore the little bodysuits and the ears and the poofy tails and served drinks. And they were...
And were being kidnapped and gang raped and had to go on dates with the VIPs.
Yeah, nobody talks about that part.
No, because they weren't allowed to.
Yeah.
And there were basically threats of, well, we recorded the whole thing and we'll release that if you go to the police, to the public. And because they didn't want to risk getting a girl pregnant and then having to pay for that, they would sodomize them and say, it's terrible. It's way worse than you think it was.
Ugh.
Like, take what you extrapolated and think is bad and then take it times 3. And that's how it really was. How you got Playmate of the Year. Whole thing.
Oh. Ugh.
Right.
Well, wasn't there a reality show for a while about...
Yes, why one of his... I don't know if they ever got married or if she was just his main girlfriend for
But there
a
were
while.
like... Didn't he have like 3 girlfriends? And...
Yes, and they brought 2 of them in kind of specifically for the show, it turns out, because they were twins. See, they had the sisters, and then he wanted them to do sister things with him. And yes, they were on a... I don't know this reporter's name. It came at the end of the series. Mm-hmm. She was so nice. I've never seen a nicer interviewer.
Nice.
Ever. And then I was like, this is amazing. I'll keep watching you. If you're really like this sympathetic to think. She was like, it's the first time they talked about their experience publicly.
What was the name of the...
Secrets of Playboy. I think it's on Hulu. So yeah, I mean, it is prepare to be disgusted and disturbed and hate everyone. Basically, including...
Well, I'm already most of the way there.
One of the girlfriends, wives, whatever she was the one who set up that show. And she wrote a tell-all book years later after she finally got away from him. And it pissed me off because everybody was like, well, she seemed happy. And I don't see... She got good things. And so I don't see why she has to say bad stuff about it. And there was a woman doing that because she was friends. She was one of Hugh's close friends. This woman, she was like, she was happy. She doesn't get to go and do this. And I'm like, okay, person who's been married like 50 years to the same man and has that security.
Yeah.
And she's like, she could have left at any time. And I'm like... First of all, he had them cut out. They weren't allowed to have jobs. They weren't allowed to be past 9 p.m. They weren't allowed to cut. Well, it really bothers me when you go see this person. He was, without beating them, an abuser who isolated them. So no, it's not that easy. She was a young woman in her 20s. What if she didn't have anywhere to go?
Yeah, what if she didn't have... Or what if her family disowned her?
She mentioned at some point being afraid because he used to video everything that happened in his room, that he'd release stuff.
That's just abysmal.
He was awful. And he's like, I'm a feminist. He argued with, what's her name? Susan Brown
Miller?
Yes. On a show. And he was so smarmy and so, I do this for women. No, you don't. Not any of this was ever done for women.
Nuh-uh.
He's like, I give them the freedom to be sexual. No, you force them to be sexual. Like, it was very upsetting. But anyway, so there was a piece... I'm sitting there watching it, and it's whatever it is, and then on comes Nancy Grace talking and yelling about something, and I'm like, oh, please stop. I can't take it. I don't understand why she needs to yell. Is that the only way she thinks people will listen to her?
Possibly.
There are plenty of female journalists we listen to who don't yell the whole time. Mm-hmm. It's deeply unpleasant. I can't handle it. I'm like, you sound like an idiot. I know that there might be fans of her out there. Sorry, I can't take it. I don't understand the yelling.
No, I don't get it either. Because there was a show, was it Boston Legal? There was some show where they had a mockery. They had of Nancy Grace. And it was this little blonde woman, and she yelled.
So it's not just me. That's like, the thing is, if somebody is yelling everything, I'm going to shut down and stop listening to it.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't care once you're like Pearl. I can't. I'm like, if she's going to yell like this, I'm not watching the third one. This is stupid. She's acting like a petulant 5-year-old and then murdering people. And somehow that makes it worse that she yelled at them like that and then murdered them.
First she irritated the hell out of them.
Yeah.
And then she killed them.
Just their big old flapping mouth. I can't handle it. Yeah, she was very saliva-y also. She does a monologue, and I looked up the trivia, and it was like, I forget, like an 8-minute monologue. Yes. It was something like, and it was all. Because Jeff was like, I can't take this anymore, right? And she wasn't spitting, it's the strings.
Oh.
Like, she's talking and there's like, and she's not swallowing,
Okay.
And so there's like strings, and I'm like, I have an issue with saliva too. So yelling and saliva, it was like everything bad. And I said, I think I like this movie, except for every time she's yelling and drooling. But I need to get past it, like, for that. So, and she's going to be in the third. She's going to be the main person in the third.
What is the third one about? Or do you know?
I don't know if it's a spoiler if I say. I was trying to think that through. And so it's basically, because if I say what it is, then it gives away something from the first one.
From X.
Yes.
Okay. Well, okay, just tell me this. Does it
but
take
I guess
place...
if you see the previews, you're going to know who
Does
it
it
is.
take place before?
It takes place after the events of X.
Okay, so there's X, and then Pearl takes place before
prequel,
X.
And then the third one that I don't remember the title.
It's going to be after X.
Yes.
Okay.
So it'll be the survivor from X.
Okay.
Because obviously if it's the same fucking actress,
Somebody has to
The previews are giving that away.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And they've said, if you go and look at the summaries, it says in all the summaries that this is that. So, yeah. The final girl.
Yes.
It's a continuation of the final girl. I'm like, is she gonna go psycho now? Like, what's the horror gonna be? Because the bad people are gone. Like, I don't understand. So whatever. I think the director just has a hard on for her or something. So whatever.
Whatevs.
What else? I guess I can start now.
1, 2, 3, go.
Go. Well, because the whole reason I heard about this on that Secrets of Playboy. And that's why I'm doing it.
Okay.
Because I went and looked it up more. And so I'm just calling it the Playmate murder. There was another Playmate murder I thought about covering with it, but this ended up being long enough on its own. Because it's kind of a sad... Some of these girls that came there, some of these women, were just very innocent before
I think
they got
I remember
there.
hearing about... When did this one take place?
1980.
I almost think I remember something in the news about a Playmate
Probably because there's some really big people involved.
Okay.
Yeah, she got caught in this awful three-way people trying to control her. It's very sad. But anyway, so her real name, Dorothy Ruth Stratten. Oh, but she changed it when she started trying to get famous, of course, and so she was better known later as Dorothy Stratten. And so that's what I'll call her from now on.
I have heard that name.
Okay. She was born February 28th, 1960 in Vancouver, British Columbia. Her parents had immigrated there from the Netherlands. Thus the last name. Dorothy was known to be very sweet, caring, and intelligent. In fact, it appears that in 1977, when she was a high school student, she'd started working at Dairy Queen part-time to help her mom out, because her dad had left the family when she was younger. While working there, she met a man named Paul Snyder. He's asshole number one.
Okay.
Snyder was known for being a club promoter, but he was constantly seeking revenue streams. Like this guy, he built things and he did this and that. He tried to do a billion things to make money in the laziest ways possible, though.
Oh.
And he'd also become involved in pimping.
Mm.
In fact, those in town called him the Jewish pimp. He was known for driving a black Corvette and wearing a heavily jeweled Star of David. That's why he got that moniker.
That is one of the tackiest things I've ever heard.
Yeah. But then picture him with a fur coat and all that. And, yep. Straight up.
It sounds
cliched like a pimp.
It sounds like a Saturday Night Live skit.
Yes.
Okay.
He'd been chased out of Vancouver by a local gang and tried pimping in LA for a while, but couldn't make money at it, so he'd returned just that year. And actually, I think they met in 78. Some of the things were different, but that adds up better. So I should have stepped. But he returned just in time to find the woman he would tell friends was, quote, class merchandise.
Ew.
End quote. Still, he was known to be attractive. He spent money spoiling her, and he liked to make her gourmet dinners at his home. He even took her to her graduation dance and paid for her dress. And I will say, he was, I believe, 26 when he took her to her high school graduation
dance. Ugh.
So, she was officially wooed, though. Consider her wooed. She thought in public, he was different. In person, he was so sweet. So, in addition to being sweet and caring, Dorothy was a bombshell. But she's super pretty. That's why everybody ends up wanting a piece of her. And after the two began dating, Snyder talked her into entering Playboy's 25th anniversary Great Playmate Hunt. And the winner of that was going to get the, with the fold out page or whatever, the centerfold. There we are. He hired someone to photograph her in the nude, which he needed her mom's permission for because she was underage. In British Columbia, you had to be 19.
Okay.
To be age of consent. That permission granted, Stratten's photos were sent in, and she became a finalist. They loved her. They were like, yes, bring her out now. Together, she and Snyder moved to LA in 1978. She didn't win the overall contest, but she did end up becoming Miss August for entering that. The winner of the contest was Candy Loving. It was felt that Dorothy was attractive enough, but too young and naive to be able to take on what that entitled.
Okay.
Dorothy also got a job as a bunny at one of the Playboy clubs, quickly becoming a Playboy darling. Dorothy wanted to become an actress, and she thought this was the way to do it. The thing is, she did start finding success. I feel she was doing really well for the people who are starting. She appeared in 3 movies in 1979. Now, the first 2 of those, I think, were bit parts, but the third one, she was the main star.
Wow.
And she was in 2 more in 1980. So that one...
And they weren't porn films?
No, they called one of them an exploitation film, and I'm not sure what they meant by that.
Okay.
But it didn't say pornography or anything like that. I think she was being beaten. She said, I remember there was a quote from her somewhere saying, oh, the poor girl just basically gets beat up the whole time.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's all I know about that. The one that she was the main star of was Galaxina, and her character was Galaxina. She was the film. It was a sci-fi film.
Nice.
And she also landed television appearances in Fantasy Island and Buck Rogers of the 25th Century.
Wow.
I watched both those. I grew up on those. During this time, she not only became a fixture at the Playboy Mansion, but she and Snyder got married June 1st, 1979 in Vegas. And there were all sorts of political things happening behind this. Hugh Hefner had taken a particular interest in Dorothy, and he warned her that the man wasn't good for her, which, warn her about yourself, motherfucker. Anyway, unfortunately, she was caught between now those 2 horrible men, both wanting to own and control her. Mm-hmm. And it would ultimately spiral out of control. Dorothy was extremely trusting and naive, and several playmates attempted to protect her from some of the worst predators at the Playboy Mansion. And it actually appears like they did manage to.
Wow.
Because there's a huge rumor mill there, right? And at no point has it come out that any of the things that happened to them happened to her.
Okay.
So it sounds like they really did. She was that's how sweet she was, is like everybody wanted to protect her.
Wow.
Right? The women wanted to protect her and the men wanted to take advantage of her. So, And it was that, maybe her marriage helped, but a lot of them were actually married. And the thing is, their husbands were rarely allowed to come to the Playboy Mansion. They had to attend things there. Mm-hmm. And they had to make themselves available, and they had to do this and that. But then they'd be like, no, your husband can't come to this. So, in January and February of 1980, Dorothy finished up. Now, here, 1980, everything that I say after this is going to be 1980. So I'll try not to repeat that even if I typed it in there. But it goes pretty quickly at this point. So, January and February 1980, Dorothy finished up filming Galaxina, did a photo shoot of Playmate of the Year. Snyder was her manager, and he drove her wherever she needed to go. He negotiated deals. He continued trying to control her life. And she ended up with getting a business manager and an agent. And he was pushing her, saying he wanted to do that. He wanted to be in control of it. Mm-hmm. He wanted to do the bookings. And she said, no, that's what their job is. And that's when there started being that pushback. Because she was like, they know what they're doing. They're getting me these movies and stuff like that. And he was like, no, I want to be in charge of it. Because he didn't want to have to work. He wanted to be paid to be her manager. And she's supporting him. But he was constantly around. He would try and come to the shoots and stuff like that. And she started getting really tired of his controlling ways and of him pushing all the time. So there was strain on the marriage at this point already. And bear in mind, they had just gotten married in mid-1979.
And she's what, 20 at this point?
Yeah.
God.
Bogdanovich, so the director, met Dorothy at the mansion.
Of course.
He had a breakup, and so he was looking for someone new. And where do you go? You go to the mansion where women have to do whatever you want them to do, right? Fuckers, all of them. And felt she'd be perfect for a part in the romantic comedy he was working on called They All Laughed. which had already cast John Ritter, Audrey Hepburn, Ben dude whose name I didn't, Ben Gazzara, who I don't really know who he is, but he was like the main star of it, so I figure I should put his name in there too. I only know Audrey Hepburn and John Ritter from the cast. In late March, she went to New York City for filming, telling Snyder that it was a closed set so that he couldn't come stand over her the whole time and damage, because he wasn't good to have around.
It wasn't because that he wanted to be
I imagine he'd be the type that was
interfering.
Yes, interfering. Ugh. No, she doesn't look good, like, that type of guy.
Embarrassing.
Yep. She and Bogdanovich began having an affair after he told her he was in love with her. He supposedly felt that it was love at first sight when they met at the Playboy Mansion, and it's just like it just
y'all can't see the skepticism on my face,
right? But it reminds me of the guys. I've been a waitress a few times who are hitting on you, and it's like, you understand that a woman in that position has to be nice to you. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean she wants you. She has to be nice to you. A, her money relies on it. B, her job relies on it.
She may not even like you.
She may want to punch you in the face.
Yeah.
So they're not coming on to you. Just so we're clear here. They don't actually want in your pants. They don't want you in theirs. They have to be nice to you. And often that's going to mean responding to flirting with flirting or whatever, because that's what they're expected to do. Anyway, she was there less than a month before she had to return to LA, where she went home to Snyder. They had a place together. There was a publicity tour for her place as Playmate of the Year, and she was contractually bound to participate, of course, though friends would later say she hated posing nude and dealing with that part of her life, but she didn't feel she had a choice. It was a necessary evil to make it in her acting career. And the thing about this is there were asides by journalists that were like, Playmates didn't become big. That wasn't, posing nude didn't skyrocket your career, but so many women thought it would. Mm-hmm. Well, if I give myself like this, it's going to get me where I need to go.
And her experience was she started out with Playboy and then got roles. So in her head, her experience was, and it wasn't causation. It was just, that was the timeline.
Well, and I'm sure you could make connections, greasy connections, but connections at the Playboy Mansion. So I don't know how she got the movies she got. There's nothing that ever went into that. But anyway, April 30th now is where we are. After the big opening ceremony at the Playboy Mansion, Dorothy made her first and only appearance on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. So I was like, that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
You're a beginning actress and you're on Johnny?
Yeah.
Wow. So it really looked like she was going to get somewhere. She left May 1st for the Canadian portion of her publicity tour, and the end of it was going to be in Vancouver so she could see her family and hang out with friends and family a little bit. During this trip, she acquiesced to Snyder coming out for part of it, and they stayed in a hotel together, though she had sent him a letter saying she needed more freedom. By this point, much of her income was going to a corporation in her name, so her business manager was doing her right. I will say that. I don't even know who that person was. They weren't even named as far as I know. But they had set up a corporation in her name, and Snyder was not made an officer of it.
Good.
So she already I think there was a part of her that knew, or the business manager knew, and convinced her to do something that protected her.
Yes, or somebody was really looking out for her.
Yeah. While they were there, she offered to give up her career to work on the marriage, but of course he didn't actually want that.
No.
He wanted to ride her to fame. Ugh. He wanted to possess her. He wanted to profit off of her. I don't know that she was even a person to him. So, and anyway, that was starting to slip through his fingers. And friends in their lives were starting to see that strain on him. He was freaking out. He was basically panicking, even though she was supporting them both. But he sees this distance happening, and he's like, oh no, I'm going to lose my meal ticket. Honestly. In June, back in New York, Dorothy sent a letter officially separating from Snyder after the trip. So his response was to then go out and have an affair, hire a private detective, but he was sending the private detective to follow her to prove she was having an affair, which she was. And he wanted to go after Bogdanovich, though.
Well, that's where the big money was.
For contractual, he felt that the marriage was a contract and that Bogdanovich had violated the contract or something. Anyway,
nice.
It was some weird rationale. July 31st, Snyder borrowed a handgun from a friend and sat outside Bogdanovich's mansion in Bel Air. But no one ever came out, and so he ends up going home. And he knew they had just returned to LA the day before, but she had gone, instead of home to Snyder, she had gone to his Bel Air home, his mansion. She had set up an apartment, so she technically came back and had an apartment.
Okay.
That was in her name. It's on her death certificate and everything. So this was her official address. And there was a woman living there, wasn't her. It was his assistant. Bogdanovich's assistant was staying in that house under her name so that she had that. And I'll talk about it a little more, but he had been burned before in the press.
Okay.
And so they were trying to keep it quiet. August 8th, Dorothy met up with Snyder at what was now his house with 2 roommates. And one of those roommates had lived with him before. He was a doctor. I've gone ahead and left his name out, even though he was in 2020 and documentaries about it. But I mean, he wasn't part of stuff.
Right.
Anyway, and the other one was a woman who had moved in after Dorothy had gone to New York. And he was trying to make her a Playboy bunny too. He decided this was his way to get, I was like, because clearly this dude couldn't actually succeed on his own merits and was dependent upon riding other people's backs in order to make a living. He thought they were going to reconcile.
Oh.
But she instead told him she was done with their relationship, that they needed to formalize the separation, and that she would be offering him a cash settlement for all he'd done to help her find success. They made an appointment for the following week where she would come to his home one more time and bring an official offer of the settlement.
Okay.
Unfortunately for him, his friend wanted the gun back, so he had to give it back. He started on what would become a week of desperately trying to get another gun. Because he was a Canadian citizen and here in a green card, he couldn't legally purchase a gun from a store. He tried to get the private detective he'd hired to not only get him a gun, but to get him a machine gun he asked for, saying it was for home protection. Then he tried to buy one from the detective, talked him out of it. So, I'm not going to do that. And talked him out of getting one.
Fuck no.
So then he found a private seller, got lost on the way to their house, was able to meet up with them later. And this was from the classifieds. So ultimately, the day before they're due to meet, he gets his hand on a 12-gauge shotgun. And he went out with friends, or I think it might have been the roommates, and he was talking about all these crazy things. And they said on their own they didn't seem concerning. After the fact, of course, they would. But he said he's going to take up hunting. And then he started talking about playmates that had died before and how it caused chaos for Playboy. And Playboy would try and pull, if one of the playmates died before their issue went to press, they would try and pull that if it was possible, if it was soon enough, and not put out nude pictures of a dead woman.
Right.
Right. And just all this weird stuff. They were like, okay. Because there had been a woman a playmate who died in a car accident, and they'd pulled her. Right. They'd managed to pull her stuff before.
Good.
Because nobody wants to be the person putting out exploitation photos of a woman who died tragically, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, he's talking about this, and they're like, okay. And they don't think much of it. They just wonder, okay, this is weird, but...
Well, because he was kind of obsessed with the industry.
Yes.
And wanting to be
so
a part of it.
So it would make sense that
he's talking about...
fixated.
Yes, and he's talking about the trivia. Well, today I learned.
Right. So August 14th, Dorothy showed up at his house around noon. His roommates were out, so it was only the 2 of them. Multiple people tried to talk her out of going. Of course. They were like, he's scary. Don't...
Or take a lawyer with you. Take someone with you.
Well, and that's the thing. The business manager said, you've done what you need to do. Send a lawyer with an offer. He needs a lawyer. You need a lawyer. But she said, no, I want to be friends. She was so naive. Mm-hmm. It was just so sad. She was so sadly pure. We're talking about a playmate, but she was.
But also, when you've had a relationship with someone, you want to believe that you know them.
Yeah.
And you want to believe they wouldn't
Most
hurt
people
you.
don't think, oh, well, he'd kill me.
Yeah.
Right? Or there would be fewer murders because they wouldn't end up in that situation. So Hefner and Bogdanovich actually both tried forbidding her from meeting with him at all and talking to him. And I was like, that's an excellent way to just make her not tell you where she's going. Dipshit. But again, it was just... control from everywhere. She didn't have a chance.
Because let's face it, both of those people had enough money flying out of their ass that they could have said, hey, I have 6 lawyers. Let me lend you one. Let me send somebody. Let me send a messenger for you.
Think there weren't lawyers hanging out at the big lawyers that defended celebrities hanging out there? I'm sure they were there.
They could have easily, like you said, instead of, if they had approached it any way other than forbidding, control and forbidding, They could have helped her. Here,
let me go with you.
Yeah.
Here, let's meet in a neutral place. Let's
meet.
Let me give you the Playboy Mansion. There's so many things that they could have done, but no, I forbid you. Okay, well, she's 20. How many 20-year-olds are like, oh, you forbid me? Okay, I just want to go then.
How many women, period, can you forbid?
Forbid, and they're like, oh, you forbid me?
Now I'm going to do it.
Yeah. She felt she owed Snyder her career. And she told a friend he'd been being nice about it in their latest conversations. That
I'm sure he was.
He had yelled previously during stuff, but no, he was being very nice now. And she thought it would be fine. And she said, we're going to separate as friends. I'm going to give him money. I'm going to help him out. Okay. Instead, Snyder's roommate showed up hours later to find her car still out front and Snyder's bedroom door shut. One roommate, the doctor, owned a German Shepherd. And the German Shepherd was pacing outside the bedroom window and whining. This is weird, but they just thought the couple had reconciled and were in the bedroom.
Right. Ew.
And his bedroom was downstairs from where the living space was. That took me a little bit to be like, when they were saying stuff, because I'm so used to bedrooms being upstairs.
Right.
But there's 3 in the house, so it might have been the basement room is bigger or whatever. So thinking, they're like, well, let's not disturb them. And so they sat down and they watched TV for a few hours. Chilling. I'm sure they had dinner in there and whatnot. Snyder's phone rang off and on throughout the time with no answer. And they thought that was a little strange. And they're like, but again, who knows what they're talking about or doing in there. But at some point, the PI contacted one of the roommates and expressed his concern. Because he'd been one of the people calling, and he'd actually followed Dorothy there that day. He knew what the plan was. He had followed her, and there she'd gone and gotten there. And he had actually called at one point, and they had a coded conversation so that she wouldn't know who he's talking to. He was like, is everything going okay? And it was fine, but then he was supposed to call back half an hour later or something, and then no answer.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and they were like, you know what? One of them finally went, because I watched an interview with them on 2020, and one of them went, we haven't even heard a toilet flush. And it's been hours.
That's weird.
Right? At some point, you're like, wait a second. So they go down. Doctor knocks on the door. They open the door. And that was around 11 p.m. She had gotten there at noon. Yeah.
Oh.
They found what each would describe as the setting for a horror movie. Both Dorothy and Snyder were naked and dead. He had sodomized her and shot her in the face, with entry just above her left eye with the shotgun. Oh. It was felt by the ME that it was about an hour later that he killed himself. He had strands of her hair clutched in his hand. So it is unknown if she was sodomized before or after death. But they found his bloody handprints on her butt and thigh, which sounds to me kind of like a after. I hope. I hope.
Yes.
And if he stayed alive for an extra hour, it's not like there was a note left behind or anything. So she was lying next to a bondage table he built himself. It was something he built, like exercise tables, and he built this bondage table. He was super proud of it, and it could have different settings, and it was in the setting position for anal sex. So this felt he'd strapped her onto that. Then he unstrapped her, and then he shot her. Or he shot her and he strapped,
Yeah.
They have no idea. I was like, honestly, though, somebody would have to, where was the blood? Where's the spatter? Where's this and that? Can you not tell, unless they were habitually doing this, there might be tearing, yes. And was that with a dead body? Or I feel like there were forensic ways to know this. And so I don't understand why it's such a mystery. It was 1980. It wasn't 1922.
Yeah.
Dorothy Stratten had been murdered at only 20 years old at the beginning of what many felt would be a successful acting career by a man who thought he owned her and was entitled to everything about her. The medical examination determined she'd been shot around 1 p.m., only about an hour after she got there. $1,100 in cash was found in her purse, which still sat in the living room open. It was thought this was meant to be a down payment on the cash settlement she was going to offer him. I did find an article that said it turned out that she had talked to her business manager about what to offer, and it said that the offer was just going to be $7,500 flat.
Wow.
So maybe that's what set him off ultimately, but he tried to get that gun for a week. Come on.
Yeah.
Her image was pulled off the cover of the October issue of Playboy in the upcoming calendar, but it was too late to pull her spread in the magazine, just like he'd said. So it ran after her death.
Oh.
Yeah. Her death wasn't the end of the drama, though. His PI thought it was a double murder. His PI kept insisting it wasn't a murder-suicide. And I'm like, buddy, he worked so hard to get a fucking gun. He planned to kill her that day. That's bullshit. And the LAPD called bullshit, which I don't think much of the LAPD in general. But I don't disagree with them. They thought it was a clear murder-suicide. And the fact release in papers, the facts seem to support this. Right. Just everything. Again, but I made a point of saying release in papers because I don't know what evidence we don't know. There were 2 book films made about her, one starring Jamie Lee Curtis and the other Mariel Hemingway.
That's the one I remember. Star.
Oh, yep, it's a number. Because you know why? That was his license plate.
Ew, I did not know that.
Star 80 or something.
Yeah, something like that. Okay.
Yep. Because he got a personalized license plate on his car with that on it.
This is pulled deep from the recesses of my
wow, I don't remember
brain.
any of this, but in my defense, I was 3. I wouldn't have seen
She was just, so she was 20 in 1980. Mm-hmm. She was just not very many years older than me. That's probably why it stuck in my...
Yeah, I could see that sticking with you. Multiple books were written about her, including Bogdanovich, who ended up releasing her last film a year after her death as well. While it didn't flop, it fizzled. And he went bankrupt paying for a re-release. He had to buy it from the movie company and re-release it wider because he didn't feel they gave it a wide enough release. Oh. And he was kind of like this smitten, obsessed guy after her death. And everything was about her. So he pushed it and paid for marketing and bought it from them to get that release, thinking it would hit better if he did it wider. And instead, he went bankrupt and lost the house that they lived in briefly. Really briefly together. The movie starring John Ritter actually had good reviews and word of mouth, though. It wasn't that they were saying it was a bad movie. It simply didn't make it.
It just wasn't a blockbuster.
Right. And now some people laud it as his best film. So I don't know. I haven't seen
Bogdanovich's or
Bogdanovich's.
Okay. Wow.
Definitely not Ritter. I don't know. I hope not. Hefner and Bogdanovich, previously good friends. I mean, that's why he had a mild war in the press over the book because Bogdanovich blamed a portion of her death on Hefner and the culture of Playboy, which probably not wrong, but it was... And as much as I'd love to blame it on that after watching the show, the documentary, it was a lot of things, and it was a bunch of toxic males.
And it's nice that he was able to call that out at the same time. That
he didn't call out Hollywood culture.
No, but he was also part of it.
Right.
He was taking advantage
of part of that culture. He was finding women there.
Yes. So you can't complain about it if you're using it.
And he was publicly called out by a few journalists and reviewers about that. Like, hello, whore Madonna complex dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, he also accused Hefner of sexually assaulting her. Hefner denied he did anything inappropriate. And in fact, his said it basically got changed kind of assaulting after, but when he first turned in the original versions of his book, it said rape. And the editors said, let's roll this back a little bit so we don't get sued. Doesn't matter. We're going to get sued anyway. Bogdanovich said it was Snyder being banned from the Playboy Mansion, where other playmates have reported he spent a lot of time in like the water grotto. There's like a famous, it's been with various movies. Women, and he'd slept with at least one of those women. It was felt, again, gossip, rumor mill. And that was even when they were in a full marriage, because once they started the breakup, Hefner said, "You're not welcome here unless she invites you."
Right.
Because he could go there without her sometimes before.
Okay.
Hefner said he'd ban Snyder so Bogdanovich could start attending with Dorothy, because they were friends. Interestingly, even Mansion gossip still doesn't say that she did anything. No indiscretions, no incidents with Mansion attendees.
Okay.
Which frequent for a lot of the other girls, right? She had a major problem with it. She didn't believe in prostituting herself out is what she called it. I'm not saying it, but she was very against that part of the culture of Playboy, and it seems like she kept herself out of it. And again, possibly with the protection of those older playmates that were trying to protect her. Hefner did eventually admit that they went nude hot tubbing together not long after she got there, that he'd hugged her and she'd made it clear she was with someone and he had respected that. What I saw in Secrets of Playboy, bullshit. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah.
The rape thing makes more sense. But he said he never had to force himself on anybody because he could get anybody he wanted. And I'm like, but by virtue of being their boss, you were forcing yourself.
Yeah.
On
You had all the money and all the power. So, no, maybe you didn't have to hit him, but... It covers so much of the dynamics that some people can't understand. Like, just feel like, watch it and then just see how you feel. Like, understand then what it means when, how many different kinds of force there are. Yes.
Basically. Why there is a charge for being somebody's boss and coercing them into a relationship because they're afraid to lose their job, for example. That's why it's still considered a crime.
It happens all the fucking time.
Yeah. Snyder's PI also sued Bogdanovich over the book because it made him look like an accomplice. Critics, and I haven't seen anywhere from anybody else that they felt he knew what was going down. He only knew about the gun aspect from him asking him to buy the machine gun. He didn't know that he was going and getting the gun and doing all this other stuff. So he wasn't a part of those. He only knew he was asking him for a home protection gun. Now, were he smarter... He would have connected some things, maybe. But I don't think he was an accomplice. Critics panned the book and pointed out that his advances, Bogdanovich's advances on Dorothy, were also questionable. And she was not the first young up-and-coming star he'd been involved with, as his affair with Sybil Shepherd had made headlines recently.
Okay.
Impacting.
I was like, I know there's someone else, and I couldn't...
Somebody pointed out he enjoyed an ingenue. Was his thing. And she was exactly Sybil Shepherd and Dorothy Stratten. When I post the pictures, he had a type, and it was a young type. And it was a perhaps young and naive type. Ultimately, the main men in her life at the end were all significantly older than her. Snyder was 9 years older. Hefner was 33 years older. Bogdanovich was 19 years older.
Hugh Hefner, I think, was 33 years older than God.
Yeah, he was.
He looked like
He's so gross. Like, I just, watching this, and I'm telling my husband about it, he's like, yeah, he was filthy. He was a terrible human being. So I think they all took advantage of her. But it also seemed like Bogdanovich, in some way, truly seemed to be in love with her. Whatever faulty backing there is for that. He even helped financially support her family after her death, because he said we would have been family. We were planning on getting married as soon as the divorce was final. Wow. So I wasn't just going to abandon the family then. But 8 years after her death, he married her little sister. Who, by the way, was 20 at the time of their marriage. Meaning she was 12 when Bogdanovich first started coming around. And I was like, boy, they have a word for that. It's called grooming.
Yeah, does anybody else want to throw up?
But I was like, but hey, that's just what rich old white men get to do in this country, right? Groom these girls over and over and over again. And people will still go to their movies, and people will still support them and say they're geniuses, thinking of Roman Polanski here.
I was just about to say,
Charlie
don't even
Chaplin.
get me started on Roman Polanski.
Guess who was a frequenter at Playboy?
Roman.
You bet.
Fucker.
As was Cosby.
Shocker.
Yeah. They showed Robin Williams there once, and I was like, no, don't tell me he did. Please don't. And then they didn't say anything about any specific issue with him, but he did go there.
Well, I think
Martin Sheen went to the clubs and was a key holder, a VIP key holder at the clubs, and took his sons with them. There's a picture of them there together. And I was like, no wonder they're so fucked up, Martin.
Yeah.
Anyway, he and her little sister divorced after 13 years.
Ugh.
In addition to all that, she didn't make it big. She was more famous after her death than she was before it. Multiple songs were also inspired by Dorothy, or at least mentioned her. The Best Was Yet to Come by Bryan Adams is completely about her.
Oh, wow.
Cover Girl by Prism.
Oh.
Dead Meat by Bush.
Oh.
And he dedicated it to her. I believe that was the one that dedicated it to her. And Californication by the Red Hot Chili Peppers mentions her.
Wow.
Sources were Wikipedia, TeresaCarpenter.com. And what it was is she wrote for The Village Voice.
Oh.
She actually did a cover story about Dorothy Stratten, November 1980, that won a Pulitzer, and she had that whole article available on her website.
Wow, nice.
Yeah. Los Angeles Times and ABC News. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just foul.
Like, there's so many, poor Jeffries had to listen to everything about the documentary.
Yeah.
And this, because I was like, oh my God, this too.
And people come back with, well, she could have just left. Really? She's in LA, which is, that's not where she's from. She's young. She's far from her family.
She's got 3 influential men. Hefner claimed he had always just been paternal with her.
Oh.
And I'm like, yeah,
Ew.
your idea of paternal is disgusting anyway.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean anything coming from your mouth. But yeah, what was she supposed to do? She tried to leave the guy.
Yeah.
She was in the process of leaving the guy. She just didn't think he'd murder her. She did what she could. She'd written him letters when she was gone. She talked to him on the phone and tried to be honest with him. It wasn't like she was cheating on him secretly, but she did at some point say, I have feelings for him. I don't want to be in this anymore. So she did tell him.
right.
Now, he just kept thinking they were going to reconcile. That's not her lying about it. That's him making assumptions about it.
Refusing to accept reality.
She's his property. As far as he was concerned, his property would come back to him. That's on him. That's not on her.
Mm-mm.
So, yeah, it's all just, she was just groomed, basically. Because Bogdanovich would have just been grooming her for then to be the Hollywood starlet. Like, I'm like, there was nobody who protected her.
No.
I mean, playmates don't have power. Yeah, some of those women tried to protect her on the grounds. That's all they could do.
Well,
They weren't guiding her in her life or anything like that. That wasn't their responsibility.
What a waste.
Isn't it? Like, I feel like she could have done something. She was getting the roles, and she was already in discussions for 2 more movie roles.
Oh.
And like, these offers were coming. People work for decades trying to get that.
Trying to get a break like that.
So, yeah. And it just got stolen away by a bunch of greedy, awful men.
Yep.
So, that's why that one, I was like, I want to cover this story, because this makes me sad. Like, it's awful.
Well, I'm going to talk about another really, really awful man.
Yes.
So, this is something that took me a little bit by surprise, because we talk a lot about, we do talk about stuff that's happening now, but a lot of times we talk about stuff, I don't think 1980 is that long. Of course, I don't think it's that long ago. But, we talk about stuff that happened in the 1900s, stuff that happened. We've gone way back. So sometimes it surprises me the shit that's still happening or has happened in our lifetimes. Because you like to think we've evolved and gotten beyond it, but we haven't.
No.
So today I'm going to talk about a super special piece of shit named Akky Yadav. He was born Bharat Kalacharan, and he's Indian, so I apologize. I may be butchering the pronunciation. He was born in 1971 or 72.
Yeah.
They aren't really certain. In the central Indian city of Nagpur in the state of Maharashtra, which, if anybody cares, is on the central western border of India. So he grew up in the Kasturba Nagar slum with 2 brothers.
Okay.
And
So he was low caste.
Not the lowest, but but apparently he had a family, because they were like, I can't remember what they called his dad. It was like he was the shoemaker's son, or the merchant's son. He
Working class.
He had working class
probably
family.
Above, say, street cleaner.
Yes. But he had a dad who was employed, but that wasn't enough. So by all accounts, he was attempting to build and lead a giant criminal organization in the slums. He wanted to have his own organized crime family that he was going to be the head of. So he started as a small-time thug, working his way up. He led a gang that robbed, murdered, tortured, used extortion as their main sources of income. So his earliest known crime was gang rape in 1991.
How does that take over anything? Okay.
Well, it'll become clear. Mm-hmm. He was known for threatening to rape anyone who opposed him or tried to stand in his way.
Oh.
Yeah. A disproportionate number of his victims were, and again, apologize, I'm not sure how to pronounce the word, Dalits, Dalits, who used to be known as, they used to be called the Untouchables.
Okay.
The lowest caste in India. So,
Power plays.
Yes, it takes a special kind of man to target the weakest people in the society. Very special. So in addition to rape, murder, and extortion, Yadav's crimes included robbery, home invasion, assault, and criminal intimidation. He would go into shops. So, and it's like he didn't just have one thing he would do. He would go into a shop and take goods and not pay for them. Or he would pay much less than they were worth. Or he would just go in and demand money in return for not being violent against the store owner. It wasn't even...
That's the one I'm used to from, like, mafia, for people starting their own little cartels and shit. Is like protection money, kind of, but it's really just protecting you from them.
Yeah, I was going to say, and it's not even... He wasn't even pretending, I will protect you from other people. It was like, I will protect you from me.
Right. Well, like, because remember, Bugsy Siegel and Meyer Lansky, it was, I will... If you pay me, I won't burn your cart.
Yes. Yes. And he was an extremely paranoid piece of shit. So people in the neighborhoods that he controlled weren't allowed to gather and talk together.
Right, because they might rise up against him, right?
Young boys were not allowed to play together, or he would break up their games. You couldn't even have a soccer game.
He was threatened by little boys.
Yes.
Great.
He threatened people with rape or murder if they tried to report his crimes to the authorities. Eventually, he was arrested over a dozen times. In fact, and I have a quote here because I'm like, wait till you hear this charge. He was detained for a year under the Maharashtra Preventive Detention Law. The Maharashtra Prevention of Dangerous Activities of Slumlords, Bootleggers, Drug Offenders, and Dangerous Persons Act of 1981. Wow. I was like, I just got to read that because... I'm like, that's a big fucking mouthful of people we're going to take into protective custody. The saying, now this is pathetic. This is so very sad. The saying in his neighborhood slum was that one of his rape victims lived in every other house. That was how bad he was. Okay. He allegedly raped 40 or more women in his lifetime, the youngest being a 10-year-old girl.
You know what?
Yeah. Staying indoors wasn't enough to keep one safe because I don't know if I can use this word as a verb, but I said he would maraud through houses if he couldn't find something he liked on the street.
Oh, yeah. Like, I need a new lamp.
I need a new lamp. For a girl.
Yeah.
I don't see anyone except terrified children. So one night he knocked on the door of a home pretending to be a friend of someone who lived there. When a woman named Asha Bay answered the door, he grabbed her, pulled her outside, and stabbed her. He cut off her ears for her earrings and then couldn't get her rings off, so he cut her fingers off. And this was all in front of her 16-year-old granddaughter.
Great.
Yeah. And that's not even the worst thing he did.
I mean, she could have taken him off if he just...
if he hadn't
killed her. That's not what he wanted.
If he hadn't stabbed her.
Right.
I can't even, I mean, I read these, but I'm not going to detail all the horrible things he did because it was just disgusting. As a woman, it didn't matter if you were young or old or pregnant or newly married. And at least one woman committed suicide after he brutalized her in a very bad way.
Shame.
Yeah. Yes. Men weren't exempt from abuse. It doesn't appear he was actually raping the men, but he was still brutalizing them. He beat a musician who couldn't pay him protection money. A street musician. Not like somebody from the Philharmonic who might have some bucks. Just a street musician. He demanded money. The guy didn't have any, so he beat him up. He forced a man to strip naked, then burned him with cigarettes. All in front of the man's family. Just so he could humiliate him in front of his family. He murdered men who threatened to turn him in or who he thought might turn him in to the authorities. Now you might be thinking, what of the authorities?
What of the authorities?
What of them? They were very busy at this time. They were counting the money from his bribes and accepting the drinks he bought them. He did. He would take them out and buy them drinks or go in and take them drinks. If a woman came in to report being raped by Yadav, the police would contact him to tell him who came in so he could target them again. Mm-hmm. Women were refused at the police station. They were told they were obviously having an affair with Yadav.
Of course.
Or they were being targeted because they were already loose women. Mm-hmm. Yep. And as I said, some of these were of the lowest caste, and they just knew. The police didn't give a singular shit what happened to them, regardless. So some of them were like, why even go in?
Which is, I mean, all of this is so familiar and widespread. Mm-hmm. And, you know, not this exact situation maybe, but super similar.
Yes. I wish the ending of this story would happen more often. Yes, because I'm that kind of bitch. There were larger repercussions from his actions, not just on the people not just the people he was brutalizing. Families who could afford it, at least 25 families moved out of the neighborhood. Packed up and moved. Mm-hmm. Families with daughters kept them home, kept them out of school, and locked indoors so that he wouldn't see them. Mm-hmm. Vegetable vendors refused to come to that neighborhood. Meaning women, the moms, the housewives, had to travel further to provide food for their families and risk being out on the streets longer. You don't think a thing.
Right.
You know, you don't normally think, well, he's brutalizing people and he's a horrible piece of shit. But you don't think, yes. And now these women have to expose themselves.
They're more at risk.
Yes. So then we come to the summer of 2004, and a woman named Ratna Dongiri. Yadav showed up at her house, demanded money, smashed her furniture, and threatened to torture and murder her family. After he and his ass monkey henchmen left. Yes, I did take a little liberty there. A woman named Usha Narayani arrived and urged Ratna to go to the police. Of course, terrified, Ratna refused. So Usha went to the police and reported the incident. The police called Yadav and told him. Yadav took 40 of his men and surrounded the Narayani house. He shouted through the door that he would not hurt anyone in the household if Usha withdrew her complaint. Usha barricaded the door and called the police.
No.
Who said, we'll be right there.
No.
Never showed up.
They're the ones who sicked on you in the first place.
Yadav, who was seen, they saw him carrying a bottle of acid. He threatened to burn Usha's face with acid and threatened her with a fate far worse than gang rape. Those were the words he used. Usha shouted insults back at him. I want to be her.
Like, if I'm going out the way in style.
I'm like, I want to be her when I grow up if I ever do. So, while shouting graphic descriptions of the torture and rape he intended to perpetrate on her, Yadav and his men tried to break the door down. Usha went to the kitchen, got a cylinder of gas that was used for cooking, grabbed a book of matches, went back to the front door and said, if anyone comes inside, I'm going to blow the whole place up with you and me both in it. And she opened the canister because when they smelled the gas, they left. I'm like, you go. Yeah. You go, Usha. You are my hero. So the story of her standing up to Yadav spread through the slums. Because this is a crowded place. There's no privacy. So this story just goes like lightning through the slums. Angry victims started congregating in the streets, maybe picking up rocks and sticks. They stoned Yadav's men, who took one look at the crowd and fled.
Pussies.
Mm-hmm. On August 6th of 2004, the crowd stormed Yadav's home and burned it down. Fearing for his life, he went to the police for protection, and they arrested him for his own protection on August 7th. His mother fled. And when I read that, that's the only mention of her.
Yeah.
This whole time, this man who is brutalizing women, and he lives with his mother. Oh. Now, I know they have more generations living together. Yeah. That's not that unusual. But I'm like, you can go out and do this and then come home and look your mother in the eye.
But it's also pretty patriarchal. So did she have power to do anything?
I don't know. But she fled. She fled the slum completely.
Bye.
When he was to appear in court that day, there was a crowd of about 500 people from the slum waiting for him. One of his lackeys, tried to pass him knives wrapped in a blanket, but the women in the crowd shouted him down and forced the police to arrest the lackey and take Yadav back into custody. I keep wanting to say Yakov.
Yeah. Smirnoff?
Yes. So
Russian.
Yeah. Different. The following day, a group attacked Yadav as he was being taken to the court, but he survived. So he's in custody, and a date of August 13th was set for the bail hearing. I'm now waving my hands around. So the police plan to keep him in custody just long enough for the atmosphere in the slum to calm back down, and then they were going to let him go. Well, no fucking shit. The people who've been living there for years know that this is what you're planning to do. What the police weren't counting on was hundreds of women who marched from the slums to the courthouse, because they didn't actually try him in his neighborhood. It was a neighboring court, because they thought this would get him away from all the furor and fury. So the women marched from the slums to the courthouse carrying kitchen knives and chili powder. It actually said vegetable knives. So I'm thinking little, but I don't know that. Kitchen knives and chili powder after hearing he was going to be released. They packed into the courtroom. They were in the front rows. They were in the front seats. When Yadav entered the courtroom and saw them, he was cocky and overconfident. When he saw one of his rape victims, he called her a prostitute and threatened to rape her again as soon as he got free. Jesus. And the police officers in the courtroom laughed. They thought that was hilarious.
Of course.
She took off her shoe and beat him about the head with her shoe.
And I think that is funny.
Yes. Saying she would kill him unless he killed her, saying, "We can't both live on this earth together. It's you or me." And they had the word for the shoe. It was like a little sandal, flip-floppy kind of sandally thing. And I'm just like, yes, you whoop that asshole upside his square old head. The chili powder was deployed by the mob of, they estimate 200 to 400 women had packed into the courthouse. They threw the chili powder and stones in his face. And also they also threw the chili powder and the stones into the faces of the police officers, who promptly turned and fled. Like, yon, bud. He was stabbed at least 70 times before the women lynched him in the courtroom.
Nice.
Not even outside on his way in. This was actually in the courtroom. In a sharing mood, the women passed the knives around so that every woman present would have the opportunity to stab him at least once, so that no one person could be blamed. The mob continued.
You can prosecute 400 of us, I suppose.
They tried. The mob continued to attack the body even after he was dead, which took approximately 15 minutes. One of his victims hacked off his penis.
Nice.
I hope they fed it to a dog. The women returned to their homes, and there was a huge celebration. People are dancing in the streets and feasting and sharing food. I'm not going to dwell a lot on what happened after that, because different things were said in the press.
Yeah.
They tried to say that it was an organized crime. Men in organized crime had put the women up to it, that some group of men had actually killed him, and the women were taking the blame to protect their men. Mm-hmm. And everybody's like, no, dog. The women stomped him. So over the next decade, 7 women and 15 men were arrested for the murder, but by 2014, they had all been cleared. There were no witnesses from the mob who would testify against each other.
Right.
They could find 0 witnesses. In addition, every woman in the surrounding slums confessed to the crime. Mm-hmm. So the court couldn't, you got 500 people who are saying, yes, I did it. You cannot process 500 people. You cannot prosecute, process, or hold 500 women, at least one of whom will take off her shoe and
beat you with it.
Wreak havoc. Later, a high court judge sided with the women, saying that they had to take matters into their own hands after the police had completely failed them.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some higher up. Once you got higher up, I'm thinking people who had more jurisdiction than just the slums, who had a larger, once you got higher up, they could look down and say, well, yes, this was terrible. This never should have happened. And I'm like, thank you for your words. What are you going to actually do?
Mm-hmm.
So my sources for this were Wikipedia. Of course, my true crime calendar. True Crime A Day calendar. I got a new one for the new year. Thanks to Amy. And the India Times. So I found it amazing that after these women did this, took it on themselves and did it, that they tried to make out, well, no, of course, women couldn't have defeated him. They had to have some men leading them.
That's right. Men had to have told him to do this.
I don't think there's a man alive who would say, take off your shoe and start hitting him with it. And that is stuck. That's what stuck with me from this story in the courtroom.
Who was it? Was it GW, that a reporter threw his shoe
Somebody,
in
yeah.
a press briefing or something? It just made me think of that. But it also makes me think of there's several cultures, possibly all of them. I don't know, where you piss off your mom, she will pull off her flip-flop. Mm-hmm. And she will smack you with it. It's like, I've seen that be a big thing for people who are Mexican. I think I saw it for Samoan.
I've seen different. Eddie Murphy used to do a whole thing.
Yeah.
About his mother taking off his shoe and throwing
it's
it.
A big thing. I believe my mother has possibly done it to my brothers. I seem to recall something.
My mother did not hit any of us with shoes. But it could be.
My brothers were all much bigger than my mom, so she had to use what she had at her disposal. Because if she tried to yell at them, they would just pick her up.
Oh. Disrespectful.
Disrespect. Mom, calm down, Mom. Just wrong memory. Hearing. Mom, stop it. Mom, you're going to hurt yourself. Mom.
I like that, Mom. You're going to
hurt yourself if you don't stop it. Yeah. So she had a hot temper.
I do know that
and 3 boys.
When the girls were little, one of the neighbor houses that they played at a lot that had kids their age, I can't remember. I don't think it was the mom. I think it was the grandma who would take off her shoe and hit you with it. I'm trying to remember, what is the Spanish word for grandmother?
Abuela?
Yes. So, of course, my girls called her Abuela. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I finally asked the woman who lived there, I said, what is your mom's name? And she laughed and she goes, well, if the kids, you could just call her Abuela. And I'm like, I think I might be her age. So
I don't want to call her.
I was like, she's really not even old enough older than me to be, because the girl's mother was younger than me. So I was like, no, she's not even old enough to be my mother. So I'm not going to call her grandma.
Call her Abuelita.
I was like, just tell me her name. That woman could make a tortilla out of thin air, out of anything. Yeah. Because I remember her going on this little tiny rant one day about how white flour was going to kill everybody, and she would put cooked oatmeal in her tortillas. And I ate these tortillas. You would not know. They were delicious. But
like a fried dough, one way or another.
Yeah. Apparently, wicked with a shoe.
Yeah. I mean, it's a thing in native stuff, too. Take off your shoe and it's just the most convenient weapon, really. That you can't really kill them or bruise them with, but they're not going to enjoy it.
Right.
So
it's going to sting.
It's fairly harmless. It's not a switch. It's just a shoe. It's safe. It's a safe weapon.
Especially if it's something like a flip-flop or a sandal or slipper.
Right. It's going to make a great noise, though, and that is going to satisfy you.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So that's part of it, too, probably. Like, yes. I'm deriving so much satisfaction from this without it being actual abuse. That's what it is. All right.
On that note,
it's time for us to go. You can look us up on buymeacoffee.com/mmmayhem and support the show in various ways, or not. You can just listen, share it out, do all that stuff. It all helps.
Yes. If there's something you want to hear us talk about, let us know.
That's right. And thank you for listening.
Yes, we'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.